All right, welcome. We do have Andrew, who is joining tonight's meeting um, I guess, a town resident at the moment, but hopefully soon to be approved as an official member of the Housing Committee.
And what's Andrew's last name?
Mannix. Oh.
Mannix.
And he was a member. He was a member once.
I remember. I'm like, wait a second. That name sounds really familiar. Thank you.
He's
Thank
back.
you, Andrew. He's back. That is so great. I'm so glad. Welcome back,
I see a lot going on the forum and the rumor mill. So I thought it was a good time to circle back.
This is excellent. I'm so glad. This is really good.
Yes. Perfect. So we have that, and I know Matt mentioned he might be a bit late this evening, so we'll just get started because we're at quorum, and then he can join when he's able to.
Look at it. He's coming. He's coming.
Oh, there he is. Perfect. We are all here. Hey, Matt.
He's muted, so he can't talk yet, but he can probably hear us.
Hi there. A little bit of a lag. Sorry about that.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
No problem. Perfect. So the agenda was shared by Keith today and earlier this week. Are there any revisions to the agenda or any comments from the public? There's no one from the public here. I mean, I guess, Andrew, if you had any additional comments or adjustments to the agenda that you wanted to share this evening, other than what was outlined. Okay, great. January 31st, we had our last meeting. The meeting minutes were also shared. Any adjustments or comments from those meeting minutes? If not, then we can accept those minutes and move on forward. Alrighty. Perfect. So the first item on the agenda is to review a flyer for town meeting day. So for a little bit of background here for you, Andrew, we were asked to have some type of involvement at the town meeting day coming up to help educate the community around housing in our community and kind of start the discussion or continue the discussion, let's say, around housing. And so over the past month, apparently Connie and I had worked on putting together a flyer that we could pass out. The idea is that this would be a stack of flyers would be there for when folks come in, and it really has some talking points, some facts, some statistics about housing in the community and different ways that folks could get involved in the discussion if they wanted to. And so that will be available there. I think we also talked about having them in the town offices if anyone was going to pick up a ballot early. And then afterwards, they could be distributed in town as well. So there was a draft that was included in the meeting minutes or the packet for this meeting. And I think today our goal is to review that flyer, make any final adjustments or changes really tonight and get our committee members' approval for it so that we can hopefully print it tomorrow or Friday and have those ready to go.
Yeah, do you want me to pull that up?
Yeah, you want to do that, Keith? That'd be great. Matt, I know you shared some comments on that, so I think it would be helpful if we just talk through what you shared as well.
Sure.
And then anything else that folks had that they want to talk about in terms of feedback.
Sure. Yeah, I'll wait for Keith to pull it up.
Well, bam.
There we go.
Thanks
Perfect.
to Connie for having we had a graphic designer colleague of hers help put this together. So I think it looks really, really slick.
No, it looks awesome. I generally speaking, I really liked pretty much everything in there. As I said in the email, I kind of laid it out pretty quickly. I don't want to make this a divisive issue. The housing is, in my opinion, is kind of a beyond race issue at this point. It's clearly affecting everyone in this community, statewide, national, etc. And I think we already have quite a difficult path to climb regarding, kind of updating more zoning standards and increasing density. And, there's lots of changes around the corner, and I think it's going to be difficult, and I would just prefer it to not be more difficult than divisive.
Okay.
That's my one opinion about that.
Yeah, and I think that was in the
The bottom of the first page.
This
Yeah.
official, yeah.
So
the
if
official
Keith, you
name
could
of this
scroll
is up-
down to the bottom of the page. Oh, yeah, the 49% part.
Yeah.
That's what you're thinking about in particular, right, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think simply stating, I should just go back to that email because I think I put it out there pretty quickly, but I think just delineating between home ownership and renters would be enough, personally. I think that's my personal opinion. In the end, it's ultimately what the group wants to go forward doing. But that's kind of just my personal opinion from a, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. And yeah, we all know the statistics. It's kind of clearly evident for quite a long time about racial disparity. But I think a lot of people are going to read into this, especially on the right and far right, and say, oh, well, they're trying to make housing for people that are not, as I said in my email, that are not from here. You know what I mean? Quite literally, when I went to build a house in Winooski, I got sued. I had African American tenants. I had Black tenants. They were fine mostly. They paid their rent. The neighbors didn't like them. I went to apply to build another house. They sued me because they didn't want me to build another house. And in a DRB meeting, in a publicly recorded meeting like this, even bigger than this in Winooski, they said, well, I don't know why you have to have more people like that moving in. Which is obviously racist, but long story short, it was a roadblock, and I don't want to make it more difficult. That's all I'm saying,
Do you
Well,
have-
the other thing about it is that this statistic is not relative to Richmond, right? I mean,
That's
like
true.
your other points have to do with Richmond, I think. They
Yes.
all have to do with Richmond. So this one is not actually relative to Richmond, so it might not fit in as well from that point of view as well.
Do we have a statistic? I think you mentioned like the homeowners versus renters. Do we have a statistic handy? I don't remember if that was in Brandy's report.
Well, what's the point of that statistic exactly?
So let me speak up to that one. And I'm still interested in what Andrew has to say, but I know he's still sorting this out. And Andrew, I don't know if you've had a chance to see this because it was in the package, so I'm not going to worry about that. So and Matt, I pulled up your email if you do want to reference that. That's easy to do. So the concern here was letting people know just how big this problem is. And there is in this, it talks very much about, if you're a police person or a teacher, or if you're the value put on homes, single homes right now that can hold a family has risen extraordinarily. And there is a real barrier to becoming a community member in Richmond, even if there is a home to sell. And we don't think, and there aren't that many homes for sale. So the impetus is to say, what are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to provide housing for everybody. And when we come to the word everybody, a lot of us in the world think of, oh, like people like me, which is great. We want to include everybody, but it also includes people who aren't like me. And we don't have I mean, it's hard to look at any statistics in Richmond and say, well, we're representing, people of color when there are so few that they hardly show up at all, which itself is a statement. I mean, whatever the ease is of moving into Richmond versus say Winooski, if you're looking for people of color, you're going to look in Winooski sooner than you're going to look in Richmond, if that's if that's of interest. We know that it's of interest to some people. Some people feel very passionately that we have on both sides, that we think of Richmond in a particular way, like inclusive, which is what the DEI statement of the select board said a year ago. I think they put out the statement that said we cherish diversity and inclusion and we welcome everybody. And it's like, okay, what does that actually look like? We know what the statement looks like, but what does it actually mean to be inclusive? So my reason for putting this in here, and I'm the person that sketched this out, and then there've been lots of updates and changes, but I'm responsible for that one, is because I know we don't often present that kind of information, and the more you present it and make it available, the more people realize that it's a thing that should be addressed, even if this is not the moment you're going to address it. So having it be present is an important step in terms of reducing racism or barriers to equity and inclusion and diversity. That doesn't mean that that is what the next step is, because the next step has often been talked about in terms of affordability for people who can't now afford, anyone who can't afford housing in Richmond, or senior citizens who are in their homes, but they don't want to be in that home anymore. They'd like to stay in Richmond and be in a different size building or with more support services and have it be a supported facility in Richmond. So there are a lot of different people with conversations at the table, and this one deserves to be at the table, even if it's the first thing that gets addressed. And that's why I included it, so that it would stay on the list of things that are important to address eventually. So that was the rationale, Virginia. Did that make sense?
Yeah, so that's the rationale for your particular statement. I'm just wondering, and I kind of forget what the title of this was, but if it's necessary to talk about the difference between home ownership and renting in this, about housing needs. So we talk about a housing crisis, and do we need to draw attention to the difference between home owning and renting? I don't know. I mean, it's just a question. It's like we need both. We need home owning and, as the first step to wealth building, whatever. But we also need rental housing for people who can't own a home or don't want to own a home, or, that's not something for them. So I'm just wondering why we need either one of these statements. And Connie, you addressed the first one nicely. And then the second one is, are we trying to draw attention to that problem or what? Anyway, that was one thing I was asking.
So when you said there are two things about the same row in this list of things, or were you thinking about something else?
No, I'm thinking about the same one,
Okay.
the last thing that talks about the gap. Well, this talks about the racial gap, but I'm also talking about the gap between home owning and renting. Do we need to bring that to attention?
So is
or
that
do we
the
just
one?
need more housing of all kinds?
So the one with the 4, the one just above the 49% is the 4, talks a little bit about how sales and owned homes have fallen and how rental households have grown. So we're switching from not necessarily saying that there's more units of one or the other, but there's more sales of, there's fewer sales of homes, whereas the volume of rental households have grown. So it's kind of two different things that we're comparing in there to try to say, looks like we have fewer housing sales. Oh, look, we have more rental units overall. They're not like, it's not like a matched comparison exactly. It's two different things. And we could say it differently, or find other statistics in Brandy's report, which I can pull up and we can look through if you'd like to. And of course I can work on this more and we could complete our work by email too. I think it's okay for us to do that to a certain degree, although Keith will advise us on that. So the ending of my thought is Matt's, who's got his hand up, is right. Putting this out there creates a thing that could be a distraction instead of a support. If our goal is to say, let's have a conversation about housing in Richmond. If someone gets, if there's an emotional driver around that particular item that makes it harder to get folks to say, let's have a conversation about this, then I could understand taking it off for the purposes of having a conversation that could later include it. That's my complete thought. Okay, thanks. Great.
Matt, you want to weigh in there?
So I really think it's important. I'd like to keep the differentiation between homeowners and renters. Again, from the reason that, yeah, we need more housing in general overall, rentals and home ownership. But I think we can all see the greatest issue here has created this housing crunch in general is the fact that fewer and fewer people have been able to afford homes. And, you know, if you can buy a home and you can stay in it for 30 years, your mortgage is going to be significantly less than it would be if you continue to rent. So in general, the best way to achieve housing affordability is through home ownership. And again, I own 30 plus rental units, but I know for a fact that, like, if you could buy a house, it's going to be cheaper for a lot of people than, you know, in general than renting. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I think it's important to highlight this change because we are seeing more and more nationally even how you know, for example, Jeff Bezos has the Amazon run thing where they're, you know, these huge corporations are going in and buying single family homes and renting them out, and it's happening in the millions, you know, millions of homes. And so it's clearly a problem, the fact that we're having a growing rental, such a large growing rental population as opposed to any home ownership population. I think there are certain cases, like Virginia said, where people might not be staying here long, or they're younger, or, you know, whatever. There's a million examples, but I think in general, a lot of people that are renters would like to be able to buy a home. So anyways, that's the only thing I have to say. And then I already stated what I thought about, you know, the last point there earlier.
So that point that is on the screen about strong consensus that Richmond residents want single unit homes, right where the cursor is. No, right where you, yeah. Sorry. They want single unit homes priced at less than $300,000 and rentals for less than $1,200 a month and more senior housing is what I drew from Brandy's report. So that's balances the two. We want single unit homes and we want them at this price, and we want rentals and we want them at this price. And none of that's going to happen unless you have more availability. If you don't increase the stock of available inventory, the prices are going to stay high. And we don't, as a town, we don't own that entire issue. You know, there's a lot of people that, you know, own their own property and they get to decide what they want to sell it for. But to the extent that the town has the ability to support increasing the stock of available housing, whether for sale or for rent, is going to help achieve this particular kind of you know, what do Richmond residents want? And maybe that's the place to go with this last line, is some statement that says, to achieve affordable housing for anybody, we would need to increase. I mean, maybe it isn't like a fact, maybe it's a conclusion that comes out of this.
Yeah, I just want to say we need to be realistic here from a building perspective. I am advocating for home ownership in a non-traditional single family. I'm advocating for, like, if we're going to build like the Buttermilk project, if we're going to have, you know, a 40 unit complex or whatever you want to say, I'm advocating for some of those to be home ownership units. It's completely unrealistic based on land prices and cost to build single family homes to ever, at this point moving forward, we're never going to have single unit homes priced at less than $300,000 or rentals for less than $1,200 unless they're subsidized. That's just kind of a fact, unless there's, you know, but there could be options for people to buy, you know, 2-bedroom condos, apartments, right? They do this in the bigger cities for $300,000, you know. In any case.
Yeah, I don't know that I disagree with Matthew. I don't have a portfolio as large as his, but I do have 6 investment properties and I've built 4 in the past 2 years that we've sold, and it's astronomical how much it costs to even put a shovel in the ground. So it's especially with the rural environment that we have and the amount of kind of the terrain that we work with mountains and rural roads and larger parcels with bigger driveways, it's very challenging. But on the 49%, the racial disparity, I think that the challenge that we're always going to run into is all of this is going to be emotional. So I think you kind of have to decide if you're going to lean into it or lean out of it, because housing is a very, very emotional topic. And I think we have to determine, or the housing committee in Richmond has to determine what they really want to focus on. If we want to focus on the people, because I think there's 2 problems. There's one, the people that are here already, with escalating. People have to refinance properties for various reasons. There's divorce, there's increasing property taxes and utilities. Housing's, even for folks that already own a home, it can be somewhat unaffordable. Because wages don't keep up. So do we want to focus on the problem with people here already? And is that the first focus to resonate for this? Because the people that are going to see this are people that live here now, I would think, based on what I've heard. So whatever we do now would want to be focused on what people are going to receive and how they're going to receive it. And then if we lean into more of because frankly, I've heard people complain about police officers and teachers are paid too much and pensions are too high on both sides of the fence. So all of these things will inflame somebody in today's heated political divide. So that would be my 2 cents. We have to choose to go into it or kind of avoid it and try to be more of a middle ground.
So reading this, would you change what about it? Anything?
I haven't been privy to all the conversations, like how you guys landed here.
I haven't
And
either.
I don't know that I right today have an opinion on lean into it or lean out of it. It's just a really important question that a committee would always want to consider, is because today is the world's divided, everything's divided. So how do you toe that middle line, or are you going to lean into things that will inflame some people no matter what, and just recognize that that is a natural outcome of pointing out the facts of the matter? So something that's going to be distributed at town meeting day and right in front of people today, if I were with this from the beginning, my opinion would be focus on things that will resonate with them, that will help us move the buck down the line to make it easier to provide affordable housing to people today and over the next 5 to 7 years, because that's how long it'll take to increase the housing stock.
So here's, Matt, you had your hand up. Did you have something?
Yeah, just quickly, Virginia was good by kind of just steering us for me, what I would just remove from, I would keep everything in this flyer. I think it's just good information. I would remove under the like line item 4, right? Number of Richmond homes sold for $300,000 or less, 21 to 23. I would remove the strong consensus that Richmond residents want single unit homes priced at less than $300,000 rentals. I would remove that last sentence because, yeah, we all want something, but if there's a total realistic scenario here, and that's never going to happen unless it's state subsidized. I just, from a construction standpoint, I don't see a way of making that happen. And then I already said in the email, I would toe that middle line. I would remove about the 22% of Black households. I think our end goal has to be to try to, I mean, really, we're going to be steering this towards like zoning changes and to increase density in one way or another. And I feel like we just need to get these changes passed, and you know, this is obviously an issue. It's not just with Black households, you know, what they own, it's their income, you know, the list goes on and on and on about racism, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel we need to just continue moving forward and get things passed. That's kind of how
I like moving forward. Let me pause for a second, Matt, because you made me realize that there's like, you know, what's this flyer intended to do? There's a long agenda for town meeting day. Article 14 is an agenda item that has to do with shall the town investigate housing at Browns Court, that small ball field that's up on Browns Trace a little bit. And because that's become a contentious issue that has sort of drifted off of what everybody to new and different topics that weren't expected.
Right.
And so the select board said, just let's let folks decide, do we want to consider housing here or not? And if we don't want to consider it, we'll put it aside. And if there's consideration there, then let's take a look at that. Then there's Article 15, which is sort of a miscellaneous area of, you can bring up any topic you want. You can present it as a, you know, if there's a second to that and there's discussion on that and people want to vote on it, then the moderator will call for a vote on any other topic that's brought up. Doesn't have to be about housing or anything else. It could be anything. And what I had thought, and I can't remember now if we discussed this in this meeting, because I'm like, been having too many conversations. So I apologize for my brain lapse here, but I thought at one point, at least I had the thought that we could consider, or like, for example, Mark or me could consider raising a motion, not as the housing committee, but just as an interested, you know, resident of Richmond, that would say something like, housing is, Article 14 will either have passed or failed, you know, then to be able to say, you know, there's clearly a lot of interest in housing. Shall the town support a community-wide conversation about what the, you know, goals of housing should be for the town? In fact, there's some people who think that the town should have nothing to do with housing, just so you know. Although there is a housing committee, but nonetheless, there are people who think that there shouldn't be. And to ask the town to vote on, should we look at what we need? Should we look at what we value? Should we look at what our goals are? And have that be what a follow-on conversation and possible vote, as the way I just put it, that would say, you know, we've got all this information that housing is a problem. So if that's the context for this flyer, if we want to use the flyer as a way of helping decide whether or not we should continue to have a broader community conversation about housing, then changing this flyer to support having a future conversation would be excellent from my perspective. If having a race-related item, as we can see at the bottom of this list, I'm saying this partly for Lisa's benefit since she just joined, If that looks like it would be an impediment to having a conversation about housing that, isn't going to help support that idea of further conversations at town meeting, then let's take it out and put in something from Brandy's report that talks about the housing stock inventory, which I just located on her report just now as you all were talking. There's definitely information about how single unit housing is the most prominent stock in the housing stock, and there's very few multi-family housing and stuff like that, that we could further support the idea that there's not enough places for people to live who want to live in Richmond, and that Richmond could grow more in terms of housing if it used alternate ways of giving people space to have their families or their homes. So I've said two things. One is, what's the purpose of this flyer? And my thought was to support a conversation at town meeting that would help us say, shall we have a broader conversation about housing after Article 14 is over? And then to say, if that's the case, then let's replace that 49% row with better information about what the housing stock is like, because we've got that.
Yeah.
I think that works. That works for me. In terms of both that goal, right? And I think that's how we've crafted this flyer, is to just continue the conversation, raise awareness of like what the situation looks like here in Richmond. So do we have one that we want to put into that row? Connie, you mentioned you have something. Do we have a statistic, or do we have that we want to write there?
I am getting closer to that. And just wanted, Mark, do you want to say hello to Lisa and see if she had a particular question or reason for being here? Because I can do this, but it will take me a second.
Good evening, Lisa. Do you have a reason or particular interest in being here tonight?
No, I live in Richmond. I'm wondering about housing. So, no, I wanted to tune into you guys, partly because the town meeting's coming up, but more because I need to know more about housing in a lot of ways, and I think this is the right place to get it.
Perfect. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
So,
Okay. Go
so I
ahead.
can continue. Okay. So one of the things that Brandy summarizes, well, she talks about housing stock throughout the entire report. Andrew, were you there when Brandy Saxton was doing this report for us, or is this new information to you? No. No. Okay. So Brandy
No, I
Saxton.
was there at the very beginning piece of it, and then that's when I departed.
Okay. Okay. So she worked with us for over a year, and she produced a report which is on the website and which is probably easy to get to, that she looked at statistics, she did interviews, she got a lot of great information. And one of the things she said is the number of mobile homes have been decreasing. Mobile homes have been decreasing, likely due to replacements of older mobile homes with single unit detached homes. She said multi-unit and attached housing comprises a very small percentage of the housing stock. A lack of diverse housing options is another way in which Richmond can, unlike some of its other rural Vermont towns, be more like urban than suburban neighbors in increasing its housing stock. I haven't found the place where those numbers are, but that was her summary statement. So we could turn this piece into a statement about the percentage of a single unit versus other kinds of dwelling structures that are multi-unit and attached, that show that we're not using all the available options to give people housing. Would that be a useful direction to go?
I certainly think it's
Yes.
better than what we have currently. I know there's a lot to talk about here, and trying to fit it onto a one page basically is nearly impossible, or 2 pages,
If that general message is the one we're looking for, I can dig the numbers out of here not instantaneously, like it'll take maybe a little while, and then I can update the flyer and recirculate it to everybody. If that general message works, and then you could tweak the language if you wanted to tweak it. But then I think we'd be, if you all are willing to say yes to that basic idea, then I think we could finish it by email. And I could do it tonight or tomorrow or something like that. I'd turn it around really fast because I know we have a short deadline.
So the message is to talk about the different kinds of housing or the statistics for the different kinds of housing. Is that what
Yes.
you're suggesting?
Yes. Either I'll have something that shows changes over time, like the percentage of, multi-unit or whatever housing is diminishing because people are building single unit structures. And so we're using our space for less, dense kinds of buildings. And that means that there's less property to go around to house people. I'm not like somebody's going to say, Connie wants high-rise apartments in Richmond, and that isn't what I mean. But we could change it a little to make it more available in Virginia, like you've said about ADUs and others. There are ways that Richmond could better use some of its options. So this is just a statistic to help support that.
Yeah, and sorry.
Go ahead.
I like that too. Also, Connie, putting that in there because, again, a lot of these would be zoning changes. It lets the homeowner or property owner decide what they want to do with their property, as opposed to, trying to make it a townwide initiative. The whole Browns Court issue was, I think, really the cart before the horse, so to speak. And obviously, like, it became incredibly contentious. Whereas, again, I think if every individual homeowner or property owner is able to, do what they want with their property, I think a lot of people will end up, taking advantage if we're able to do more density. But, they don't have to. So.
Connie, can I ask you a question about this minus 75,138 number? Is that the shortfall to buy a house or to rent a property, or what exactly?
So
Yourself.
Keith has got the right frame around this. Do you see how the income needed to afford a median house is $183,000 up above on the next row at the top of the screen? Keith's got his cursor on it. Virginia, do you see that?
A new Richmond resident or family would need a household income of blah, blah, blah to afford the medium house. To buy the medium income house? Is that what it is? To buy it?
They need a household income of $183,000 to afford the median house. So $183,000 plus is what you need if you're going to get a normal house in Richmond now.
And not spend more than 30% of your income on housing.
Okay, we're talking about buying it. It doesn't really say
Right.
that, but
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
House sale price.
To
I mean,
afford.
price.
We could change that to buy. But it includes, for example, utility costs and stuff like that. The $183,000 is the 30%
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So that number, $183,000, if you subtract from $183,000,
that's fine. I just wondered if it was buying or renting.
Okay.
Part,
no,
but if it's buying, then that's fine.
Okay. Yes, it was buying.
To buy a house.
And then the $75,000 was the shortfall of the police and teacher salaries put together.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know, so I want to go back to Matt's suggestion just to make sure the whole committee's had a chance to think. So if you could scroll down just a little bit, Keith, there's the sentence in the fourth row that has the number 4 in it. The sentence starts, there was a strong consensus. That is directly out of Brandy's report. So that is like a factoid, the fact that people want it doesn't make it true. but it does show that Richmond residents really do want to have affordable homes. I mean, that maybe their dreams of affordability are now unrealistic, but nonetheless, because the residents of Richmond want that, that makes it to me a town priority. So if someone were to say, why is the town caring about housing? Let the private market take care of it. We're a capitalistic country, people get to sell what they have for what they can get for it, blah, blah, blah. And the answer is because the people in our community want more affordable housing, and the town has the ability to help that happen just based on what it chooses to create for zoning ordinances and possibly other things as well. I'm not really sure, but but the reason I like that statement is that it reinforces that this is something that the community cares about. And that was my best statement for reinforcing that. So that's why I like it. I do agree it's unrealistic, that that's not possible at this point. But knowing what my community members want helps me understand why it's important to have a conversation about this.
Okay, so are we okay leaving that sentence in?
Yeah, I think I'd be okay leaving it in.
Okay.
Matt, can you live with it?
I mean, again, it's a consensus thing, obviously, no pun intended. It is what it is. I tend to be a realist, so it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's probably not just zoning constraints that prevent that from being a reality.
Right.
But anyway, zoning constraints are a piece of it, but there's a lot that is in play besides that.
Exactly. And I think, I wish, I'm not sure if the question was that report was awesome, the Brandy report, but I wonder if it had been phrased in a different manner, if the question had been phrased in a manner of, if you could buy a home right now, a condo, an apartment, a single family home at less than $300,000, would you like that? Because I feel like the question might not have been phrased correctly, because I think a lot of people would buy, and the market's actually supporting this, a condo or townhome or whatever, apartment in one of the bigger buildings like in Buttermilk for $300,000 or less if they had the opportunity. And that makes me happy because I think that's more realistic than this statement. But that's, it is what it is.
Okay. Just in the interest of time, I do want to continue to make sure we're continuing to move forward. So for Matt, you can live with it, and there aren't any other strong objections, I'd say we just leave that. Connie, it sounds like you're going to come back with a new statistic here for replacing that last line. And then do we want any questions or thoughts on the second page that we have here?
Yeah, and just one final comment on that. I mean, I think that last line, Connie, if you can put in something that talks about diversity of housing,
Okay.
will help to balance this previous one about the single family homes. I mean, putting in something about there are other options besides buying a single unit home that
Mm-hmm.
should be exploring, especially if you're directing this towards a conversation about housing in general. Let's see what the other options are out there and talk about the other options as well. Diversity of housing, diversity of opportunity. So anyway,
Yes.
just a thought to help balance the one above it.
Yes. And Virginia, what I'd like to do is run it by you first, because you have so much more knowledge of the data and the understanding of the context, just based on your history. If I could start with you and run it past you first, then when we're the two of us are like, yep, this is it, we can share it with the whole group. I think that'll help us get there faster. If you're around.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
Fine.
And
I don't know that I have any more insight into what's going to be persuasive than you, but anyway, sure.
well, you've been trying to help people understand
Yeah.
this for a long time, so I respect that. Anyway, thanks.
Okay,
right.
page 2.
Page 2, 3 ways the housing committee is addressing the housing crisis. The focus groups were again from the Brandy report, pulled out there, really just trying to get some voices of the community. Townwide conversation, right? We talked about potentially having some type of housing summit, whatever form that comes in, and then kind of a call to action around, hey, come join or volunteer with the housing committee as well.
And that goes to a survey. And do you want to talk about the survey items, Mark?
Sure. Yeah, the survey was just really a quick way to either get thoughts from folks about housing in general, or to show interest in joining the committee. So it's really, I don't remember the exact questions on there, but
I have them on my screen. Keith, do you want to let me share my screen and then I can?
Yep.
Okay. This will be quick. It's
oh,
not
and
long.
Lisa, sorry, you had
Yeah.
your hand up. Forgot.
So just real quick.
Yep.
Name. None of these are required, by the way. Email address. Are you a Richmond resident? Are you interested in joining the housing committee? Then an open-ended comment, suggestions, whatever.
Yeah.
You had made a suggestion, Mark, when you saw this, and I'm like trying to remember what it was. I'm so sorry. It was, do you happen to remember?
No. Let me see if I can pull it up in my email.
Okay.
But while we do that, Lisa, did you want to say a comment?
Lisa, you're muted if you want to share.
Yeah, I just had one, I guess, simple question, but what interest rate or mortgage rate, I should say, is that housing price based on? I mean, hopefully rates are not going to get any higher. They should be coming down sometime this year, starting middle of the year. It has a big influence on the mortgage cost, of course. Do you know what rate that's based on, Connie?
I did that calculation.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, I wrote it down somewhere. It was a going rate that I pulled off online. I don't remember. It's probably in the 6 or 7 range would be my guess. Percent range. And then I did do a calculation for taxes as well. So, well, it doesn't, that includes taxes and housing, the purchase price, right? Mortgage with the purchase price, 20% down, etc. I did not get much further than that in terms of factoring in like a maintenance cost or like that. But
those are the big ones right there. Okay, thank you.
And Connie, I don't see that question, so I'm not sure somewhere, but I think it's okay.
So Mark, did you have this billed as a survey? Is that what the lead-in was, if you want to take a survey?
What Connie is showing on the screen right here?
Yeah, that thing, that list of questions. Did you have it on your previous screen? Did you say, do you want to take a survey? Go to the
No, it wasn't a survey.
Because it's not really a survey. I mean, it doesn't kind of, what was the lead into it?
Keith, you want to put the page 2 of the flyer back up?
Yeah, it was just fill out our interest form. If you want to have a say,
form. Okay.
You want to have a say in housing and how help shape the future.
It's an interest form. Okay. Yep, that's good.
Yep. Good. Okay.
And does it ask? Now I've forgotten what the interest form says, does it ask if, can't
Hold on, I'll
remember
go
one
there.
page to the next. Does it ask if you want to have a town-wide conversation about housing in
No.
general or not?
No, just this form just says, are you interested in joining the housing committee? It's already asked for your name and email address.
Okay. Do
And
you want
if
to
you have
ask
comments.
people if they're interested in having a town-wide discussion? Because I mean, that was the problem with the whole select board resolution about whether it's just about Brown's Court. You know, at one point in the select board meeting, it was going to be a general, Jay Furr wanted it to be a general question for town meeting about whether people wanted to have a town-wide conversation. But then it sifted down to whether they wanted to have a conversation about Brown's Court. And
Right.
which I think was a good thing in that if they had said, do you want to have a town-wide conversation about housing, including Brown's Court? If you got no's to that, you wouldn't know whether it was because people didn't want Brown's Court or people didn't want
Right.
the conversation. So I think it
Right.
was good that they made one question out of it, but it
Yes.
still allows for the other question, which is, do you want to have a conversation in general about housing, which is what you're suggesting the housing committee
Right.
would like to do, but would you like to hear from people whether they would or wouldn't like to have that conversation, or is that implied somehow?
It's not implied because we don't know when people will be picking this up. Like if you're a voter and you've just run in to do your vote and you're leaving and you pick up this flyer and you go, oh, I wonder what the survey is, you won't have that context of what happened in Article 14 to inform you about what's going on with Article 15. Article 15, I was thinking, and this is a different topic, and Mark, we could hold this for later in our meeting tonight.
Yeah, I think maybe let's just wrap up the flyer.
Okay.
If there's anything else on
Okay.
the flyer.
Yeah.
And Virginia, I'd be open to adding that question, but maybe we talk about that in our next agenda.
Yeah, well, I think personally it would be a good question to ask.
Yeah.
You know, are you interested in joining the housing committee? Well, no, you know, don't have time, whatever. But are you interested in having a town-wide conversation about housing?
Yep.
So, as opposed to,
I'd be in favor of that to capture anyone's thoughts that maybe are outside of this resolution that we're trying
and
to
they don't want to give any feedback. They don't have any particular feedback that they can give at this point in time, so they can't answer the next question. But at least they have shown that they have an interest in continuing this conversation.
So tell me what the item should say so I get it right.
I'd suggest, do you have an interest in having a town-wide conversation or whatever you said in the previous bullet? What, you know, are you interested?
Do you support having a town-wide conversation about housing?
Right.
Support having, I just want to get it down because I'll forget it as soon as we go to the next thing. Having a
Right.
town-wide conversation about housing in Richmond. Housing.
Or about developing a housing policy or something. I mean, depending on how few words you want to use. What you said first was fine.
Well, that gets more complicated in terms of people understanding what a policy is.
Okay, well, just
Conversation is
supporting
like,
the conversation. That's good.
do you
Sounds
support
good.
having a town-wide conversation about housing in Richmond?
Mhm.
That sound clear? Unambiguous? Well, I'll do it one more time. Do you support having a town-wide conversation about housing in Richmond?
Yep. And just make sure it aligns with what you've just said in the previous piece. Right
Okay.
before you talk about this, you talk about having a town-wide conversation. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
little middle paragraph at the bottom of the second page talks about having a town-wide conversation. Just make sure that it sort of uses the same language or reflects the same thing.
Okay. I'm just going to my version of that so then I know I got what we have on the bottom of page 2 is join or volunteer with a housing committee. The people of Richmond have a say in how we want to shape the future of housing in our town. Help solve the housing crisis together. Please fill out our interest form.
No, I'm talking about box 2 you have here.
Oh, okay. Town-wide conversation. Say it like
just
that.
make sure
Yes.
you use the same kind of language to see if people want to do that or want to
Yeah.
participate somehow.
Yeah. So that definitely keeps us talking about townwide conversation. Okay, I got it. I got it written down. I've heard from Virginia and Mark. Andrew or Matt, any other thoughts?
No, I liked everything else on here. That's
Okay. Okay, and Andrew looks.
Yeah, I concur. Looks good.
All right, so I'll add that item underneath at the very bottom of the survey. So it's the last item. So
Or
they've
the
had a
one
chance.
before the feedback. Put it before the
Okay.
feedback, because the feedback is
good.
the open-ended question.
Yep. So this will just be a yes, no. And then they can go ahead and add any other comments. All right, that was great. Thank you. Okay. The QR code won't change. Everything's going to stay the same. So it'll all work. When you see this though, do point your camera at it and make sure that it works for you. That way I will feel comfortable that it's still working. Just let me know if there's any
Yeah, I
problem.
just did. It worked.
Good. All right.
Okay.
Back to you, Mark, I think. Thanks for
Great.
listening to all that.
Well, I think we should move on to our second agenda item here. Thank you for the feedback on that. We've already talked a little bit about raising a motion, which would be under that agenda item 15 during town meeting day. I know, Keith, you had some comments that you shared just earlier today on that. Do you want to give any kind of overview of thoughts on emotion or not emotion before we get into any details?
Yeah, I mean, I did reach out to Bard on this earlier this week and later last week, and he was very opaque about his answer. And I think that has to do with open meeting laws at this point. And I know it was brought up in some meetings about having a summit, so to speak. He didn't want to commit to that. He wanted to have that come out organically during a select board meeting or at town meeting day. So that's the impetus of my response to you in my email, Mark, is that it's too opaque to really go ahead and even do a motion at this point or draft one up. I think we could do one on the fly if need be. It's pretty simple, you know, and I could certainly do that. But as far as any specificity on what the select board wanted, there's none. There's zero in that regard. So,
well, I think isn't that the point though of us potentially raising this during that last segment of town meeting day, in terms of saying, hey, members of this committee and or the public, we just want to bring this up, which would help support the decision of the select board to spend some time understanding or researching if we should be doing.
Yeah, I think he was hesitant to accepting any draft motion until he wants to make sure that that conversation is going to happen before that happens. It kind of puts me in an awkward position. But I certainly could draft one up regardless. I don't think that's a big deal, but I did want to run it through the committee first.
Yeah.
And just inform you of my discussion with Bard.
Okay. I mean, I get that Barb maybe doesn't want to put a stake in the ground outside of committee. Totally understand
Correct.
that. But I don't know if that prevents us from saying that we couldn't move forward with something that
We can mock something up. That's fine, but I wanted to make sure that I'm not wasting my time on it. So,
and I know, Connie, you had some thoughts on what that particular motion could be. I don't know if you have that in front of you.
I have it in front of my brain, but I too didn't want to commit to writing something down until I met with you all as a committee, and the nature of the process in town meeting, and you all may know this already, but anyway, for my own purposes, is someone poses a motion that's in the form of a yes/no question, like, shall the town fill in the blank of whatever you think the town should be? And the answer is yes, support it, no, forget it. And that gets, you raise your hand and you say to the moderator, I have I feel housing is very important, whatever. It sounds like it's important to everybody else based on what everybody just heard. I suggest that we have a town conversation about this, and a townwide conversation as suggested in this handy bright green flyer that is now been in everybody's hands for several hours. And therefore, I raise a motion. And the motion is, shall the town of Richmond or shall the select board ask the housing committee to, and that's why this could all change. It could be the planning commission. It could be the select board. It could be anybody. It could be Keith. It could
Housing
be
committee.
okay,
Housing
not
committee's good.
It's you guys.
housing committee is good. So shall the select board task the housing committee with supporting a townwide conversation. I don't have to call it a summit. It doesn't have
No
to sound that
summit.
grand.
Don't
So-
call it a summit.
so, okay. It sounds like way presidential. Have
No.
support a townwide conversation to identify the needs, values, fill in the blank with another noun, that the town, the values around housing that the town has and the needs that it should address. Something like that. That's my start. I hope somebody wrote that down because I don't write and talk at the same time. It's a problem I have. Anyway, I'll work on that. But so the point is that you have that. You say that out loud, you read it from your little whatever you've written on. It could be instantly at that time, or you could have already prepared it. Somebody in the audience has to say, I second that. Could be another person from this committee. That's okay. And then Clint Buxton says, please bring it up to me so I can see it. So you walk it up. You have 2 copies of it. In other words, you walk it up and hand it to Clint and he reads it again. And he then says, is there discussion? It works something like that. Then there's a whole long conversation until somebody says, or Clint says himself, I'm calling the question. It's time to vote on this, in other words. And then discussion ends and people either yay or nay. And if you can't tell the difference, then it goes to hands. And if you can't tell the difference, then it goes to paper ballot. Hopefully not. That takes like another 45 minutes just to process that. So that's the way it works. And then what the select board then has is, yeah, we should talk about housing more, or no, we should not have a townwide conversation. We'll do something different instead. But that's the purpose of the motion. And it comes at a time when about 150 people or maybe 200 people from Richmond are all in the same room and can provide their opinion on should we have a wider conversation about this beyond town meeting, obviously. So that's the rationale behind the whole thing, and something like the language I was thinking about.
Well, one thing I would suggest immediately is that you don't ask if there would support, I think what you said was that the select board should ask the housing committee if they would support a townwide conversation. So the issue is not whether they'd support it or not. The issue is who's going to do the work. The issue is, do we want to expend town resources or something? I mean, I think it has to be more exact. And this is the trouble with this summit language is nobody, even less people know what a housing summit means than know what a townwide conversation means. So the problem is not, it's like asking people if they support bike paths. Well, everybody supports bike paths, but there's a problem, which is the expense. And it's the same with this, is somebody has to organize it. A townwide conversation is not like a simple thing to organize, Somebody has to do the work. Do we want to expend town resources and committee time and energy for the purpose of something? And let's be more exact if we can. I mean, it just...
Sure.
People will say they'll support anything, but the question is about the resources, the time, the energy that goes to support it. you know, all of those things come into it. And I would like that to be more clear in a motion, and maybe what more of the specifics of organizing such a thing would be, what the result is going to be to come out of it. Just speaking from the fact that the Planning Commission has thought about this for years and years, and we were unable to figure it out. So the Select Board made the Housing Committee. Thank goodness, took it off the Planning Commission's plate, over to the Housing Committee. You do this work. Well, it's hard work, you know, what is the work actually, and all that kind of thing, the questions. So I would just like it to be more specific. If you're going to have a motion, before getting the information back from your interest survey as to whether people want it or not, you would have something that's more specific about what it takes to have a useful conversation townwide about something, you know, like housing.
Well, it's a good question. We won't have the results of the survey in time for raising this motion because the survey goes on for as long as people want to respond to it. And maybe very few people will respond to it. You know,
Possible. Yeah.
You know, who knows? I can keep track of it during the day. That's a possibility. I can summarize the data, assuming that I have internet connection in the middle school. But anyway, in the meantime, these are my notes that you're all looking at. This, and the part in red is the part that I'm changing as Virginia was talking. So it now says, shall the Richmond Select Board task the Richmond Housing Committee? So a task means your assignment to me. That's what it means. To engage diverse members of the Richmond community in a town-wide conversation. That's the thing we've agreed on as our language about housing. It needs to be more specific than that, Virginia.
Well, do you remember, or do you have it handy there? I'm sure I couldn't pick it up handily, but what the mission statement of the Housing Committee is?
Yes, I do have that handy.
Is this the mission statement of the Housing Committee, what they're supposed to be doing anyway? But I don't know.
Give that to you. Hold on. We worked on this back in July. Remember, we made a bunch of changes to it.
I do, but I don't remember what was said.
Hold on. I'm going to share it with you. You're going to get my whole screen. Now you're going to see all the ugly stuff. So sorry about that. But this way I don't have to keep cutting things off. All righty. I think you can see Housing Committee charge. Somebody say something. Not yet. Not yet.
No.
All right. How about now?
It's loading.
Is that?
Yeah.
There it
Yes.
is.
Yes. Okay. The Housing Committee is responsible for gathering communities' demographic and housing data. Yay, we did that. Generating housing policy related ideas and concepts, ensuring housing is available for all protected classes. That is why I liked my little row that we've taken out. And educating the community on housing related issues. So that's its overall charge. Then we have a list of things that we thought we would do in 2024, which we never took to the Select Board and got them to approve because we always ran out of time. But nonetheless, we gave this to ourselves. And you can see all the track changes on it. But we're supporting the Planning Commission zoning changes with public outreach activities related to Act 47, formerly S100. That relates to
very specific goals.
And begin work on town plan housing element to comply with Act 47 to be completed next year. Increase our membership. Yay, Andrew. Yay, Matt. Got those done. Or almost done. Andrew's not quite here yet, but soon to be. And then long-term goals is improve availability, maintain and update the data. Something that I don't completely understand about density bonus regulations.
Right.
And advanced smart growth goals. And these are a bunch of things.
So I guess basically the mission was assuming that we needed to have more housing. I mean, that we haven't specifically said have a town-wide conversation, but this assumes that we think it's important. So I
Mhm.
guess maybe we should find out if other people think it's important. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
this,
Well-
all of these things assume that we think it's important.
Well, I've heard pretty clearly from some people, and this is not like systematic, it's just the way it shows up, is that some people don't think the town has anything to do with housing. Some people think that the town has everything to do with housing, and some people are in the middle. So that's kind of normal. So, opinions differ, and that's why a motion, this is hot. I should be able to switch right back to where I was.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, is to say,
Doing
do you
well
all
so far.
think, who go to town meeting, at least you guys think that we should work on housing? And the first step in doing that perhaps is to engage members of the community in a townwide conversation about housing.
And I do see that a type of housing summit has a conversation, let's say conversation, and fulfill both the needs or the mission of the housing committee. Like I do feel like it's in our purview, because a townwide conversation doesn't necessarily have to be one-sided in a sense that we're hearing from the town about what they want for housing. It's also an opportunity, I think, for the housing committee to have a discussion about what are the options available to increase, modernize, fulfill different kind of needs in our community. So, there could be, and I think that was in the description in the flyer, right? Having a conversation, bringing in some experts, right, that talk about something easy like how to get some maybe grant funding to turn your house into a multifamily from a single family if that's available, or how to build an ADU on your property. Maybe it's not as hard as you think, right? Like if you've been thinking about this, right? So there could be those education components which can also fulfill like our mission there. And I know Keith and I were talking last week about like permit requests, right? And he was looking for some data on our permit request trends in the town for additional units. And is there a goal that we set as a committee that we want to see this permit request number increase, or if there's another metric that we can track and increase by X percentage? And some of those activities that come out of this townwide conversation could help also support those goals. And does that conversation need to happen on one day as one big blowout event?
No.
It could be something that takes happens over multiple weeks or months, and there's different elements of that conversation, so it's not necessarily like big. Today we're having our conversation about housing. This is all going to be packed into one day, right?
And we did, with the Brandy Saxton work, have a lot of those conversations. So it's not like this is a new thing that this committee is engaging, and do we need the select board to tell us that we need to do that? I mean, we've kind of already started to do that work with Brandy.
Yeah,
I don't think we can, the housing committee, I think on its own could organize any kind of thing that we have time and energy to organize that would already fit in with the mission that we have been tasked with already. But anyway, I mean, maybe this would be a reminder to people, or to raise the profile of it or something. I don't know.
I tend to agree that this seems a bit repetitive. We don't need to ask them already for approval. I think, again, since you brought back up the kind of charter, so to speak, of the housing committee, the charge, it seems to me that we just actually need to reach out more and get more people to honestly come to these meetings, right? The ideal time would be to have people come participate during these meetings. I don't necessarily think it's not a bad idea if somebody's going to raise a point on what is on section 15 there of the town meeting day. I think people like having, they know there's a time that they can come hear about this and discuss it. You know, it's going to be, you know, whatever's June 5th, 2024, etc. You know, we can have a conversation about this in the, in the town. Doesn't have to be the only meeting, but I think a lot of people do like, oh, it's a good time to get a lot of people to discuss it. And I think there's probably too much during town meeting day to have that out, so to speak. So on
Do
and
we
so-
want to leave out the part about the select board tasking us and just say, shall the Richmond Housing Committee engage diverse members of the community or something in this conversation?
Sure,
Does the
yeah.
select board have to tell us to do it? I mean, they've already told us to do it once
Yeah.
by forming this committee. And
Yep.
they're not binding, they're only advisory. So it could be advisory to us as well as advisory to the select board to tell us to do it, or anyway,
So
we could make it our thing.
just to mention out there, what if we ask this and everyone says no overwhelmingly? Like, does that mean we're not going to do it?
Yep, nope,
What is that
bye.
mechanism?
Well,
We're out of here.
that is a certain, so what matters about
Good
this
point.
isn't necessarily the yes or no, because as I think Virginia or Matt pointed out, this is advisory. But what is really interesting is the conversation and listening to what people have to say. And I already know that there's diverse opinions on this and how people are touched to move and talk. And, getting up and speaking in public, for some people, it's easy. All right. For others, it's a bit of a challenge. And to hear them say what's important to them, it's almost like being able to say, what do you value in housing? What do you care about? And to get it's an opportunity to elicit a certain kind of somewhat artificial, but still very real beginnings of a conversation. It doesn't necessarily mean that we wouldn't, if this got voted down, it would be interesting to hear what the conversation is, because somebody would say, you should do this instead, you should do that instead. It's also possible to modify the motion that's being worked on and discussed, because the person who proposes the motion and got seconded can also say, oh, I hear what people are saying. Yes, it'd be better if we said it this way. There's an awful lot to learn by giving, even if it's not a perfect statement, out there for people to poke at and to see if they could make it better, and to have a more informative process that would help our community move forward on housing. So I'm not worried about a no vote either. What I'm looking forward to is the conversation. And that's what's going to tell us how to move forward.
And I think that's kind of how this all started, right? We originally were going to maybe have some type of floor time to do a talk, but that didn't really work out. But this is the second best of, if this is our goal, is really just to start that conversation and hear where people are leaning, and then adjust from there, because we have a captive audience. We have a cross section of the community there, and really our goal is just to hear from the community. Then, I think I would be in favor of asking this or something like this.
And do we have ideas about what we would do in the form of engaging members of the Richmond community?
I have vague ideas about that would be fun to talk about, but I don't know if this is the moment, since we've got 7 minutes left of our meeting. But I also think that we could probably get some help with that we don't have to invent it all ourselves, just like we didn't have, like Brandy Saxton did like 99.9% of the work. I don't know that we would get away with that this time. We'd probably have to be more involved, but we could certainly get help. Keith, say something if you disagree. But
no, I don't disagree. My focus is on education, is educating the general public on what are the opportunities before you. And one of my next moves is or discussions is with Matt on that home ownership pathway. I want to really drill down into that too. You'll see the doc that I installed today on in our packet is a draft doc, but it is the beginnings of that education. I'd like to add to that,
Yeah.
including what changes in the zoning that Act 47 has done. Let's get that in a claxon, because that is active right now. But our zoning regulations are not up to date to do that. It's not like people are opening up our zoning regulations and reading it, but regardless, the fact of the matter is our density has increased dramatically. So a lot of people don't know that. ADUs, I mean, the list goes on, education-wise.
Yes.
Okay, so just to knowing that we have just a few minutes left, anyone have any opposition to what was highlighted here in red, or having something like this talked about in town meeting day? And honestly, as a town person, Connie could just stand up and say this anyways, because this doesn't have to be necessarily bad.
Right. And if I was to be
Yes.
the one that would stand up and say it, I wouldn't say this is the housing committee. I would say I'm Connie and I live in Richmond, and I'm really interested in the housing. Could I make a motion that supports future townwide conversations? Here's my motion. It'd be something like that. And then maybe somebody would second it, and then it would go on.
So any opposition or any other comments on that? Okay.
Going once,
Good.
going twice. Okay.
So I know we just have a few minutes left. Keith, you mentioned that briefly about the document you put together, which I found immensely helpful to just to read through and organize my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, what I would ask is that the committee members read that doc. If they have any questions, please forward it to me. I'm going to work on that. I think it's going to be an active document and it's going to need revision, but the basics are there. It's a conversation that needs to happen because affordable housing falls under an umbrella that's pretty large and is misused quite often. And there are different development schemes with each one of them. And that's kind of the task I've given myself, is to educate the general public on that. And this is the first extent that I put that on in writing. So any comments back, please, by all means, send them forward to me. And I know that was a last minute thing I dropped on you. So
And this committee and the planning commission are really going to have to work together to make sure everyone uses the terms correctly, because the word affordable housing is used to mean a whole lot of different things. And the conversation just, is like ships passing in the night without seeing each other when people talk about this. So I really would like, from the planning commission's point of view, for us all and the planning commission to work together to have a set of words that we say when we talk about affordable housing, because it is used way differently in lots of different contexts, which confuses and muddies the water no end. So anyway, I would like to, work from this document and other things to define how we're going to use them, and then always use them the same way when we talk to people and when they talk to us, to elicit what they mean in terms of our scheme.
I work with patients who participate in our research projects at the university, and we've learned that we develop a glossary together that we have to practice. You're absolutely right, Virginia. Everybody has to practice. And you do that by developing a glossary and then using it consistently and reminding each other. It's a good thing to do.
that's all I got on that subject.
All right, thank you, Keith.
Great.
The last one item I just did want to append here is Keith, you sent me a note about our former Google Drive that seemed to have gotten lost in the ether, which had a lot of great content in it. Can we get another link, and then maybe we can populate from our notes what we have back into some kind of drive space so we can maybe
Yes.
rebuild some of that information.
Yeah, the short answer to that is absolutely yes. I did look into that on the Microsoft platform, which is what we're on. And it doesn't seem to be too onerous. I did some testing on it. It didn't quite bounce back correctly, so I still got to do a little bit more. But yeah, I do want to get something out to the committee members on that. So we have a central depository for everything. And it went into the ether. I have no idea. I mean, I was assured that everything transferred over.
Yeah.
But-
So, which lost like that original housing report that I think data report, and then the stuff from the intern are the things that maybe have been lost. Unless
I may have that.
Okay, if you have that, that would be great. And I think
My habit was, because I work a lot offline, was to copy everything over. That doesn't mean I have it. It just means I might. So if you've got a list of things you think you're missing, could you send them to me and I'll go look for them later?
okay, that'd be great. Perfect. Well, it's 7 o'clock. Any other final comments?
Next meeting is March 27th at 5:30. Does that work for everybody?
Yep, we'll follow up on the results of town meeting day. I unfortunately will not be able to make town meeting day. I was called out to a work trip out of town, which I don't do a lot of work trips, but that happened to be on Monday.
Joy.
So, Connie, you're holding down the fort at town meeting day unless Matt or Andrew or Virginia. Virginia, I'm assuming you'll probably be there.
Virginia, how about
help
you,
support.
Matt or Andrew? Do you plan on attending?
I might actually be able to be there for a little bit. I actually I had an accident about 2 weeks ago. I broke my leg working on our new house.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I can't really work on houses currently. So I laid up pretty good in my my current.
Oh, no.
house, so I'll probably be able to show up for a little bit of it, actually, honestly.
Great,
Okay.
great.
House.
Thanks. I'm glad. Whatever you can come for is great.
Yeah, milk that pampering there, Matt. Just milk it.
How about you, Andrew? What do you think?
Yes, I'll be there later in the day as well.
That's great. I'm glad.
Okay.
I might not be able to make the 27th meeting. Maybe I will, but I have a grandchild who's due about
Oh, wow,
the
that's great.
26th. So I may not be here, but
Where's
may.
the grand? Where will you be if you are not
In-
here?
in New York,
Oh, yeah, that's
it's kind of
wonderful.
a bit far away, but
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
Well, I hope it's good, wonderful outcomes everywhere. And I do plan to be at town meeting day, and I will stand up and make a motion like we just talked about, or something different that's related, and I will pay attention and take notes.
Thank you,
And-
Connie.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Connie.
yeah. Well, thank you all. It's a pleasure working with you all. Really.
Well, we'll call a meeting. We'll finish up that report and get that so we can get it printed this week.
Yes. All right. Back to you all soon on that. And thanks.
Folks,
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.
fantastic.